Hey, it works. All right, I'm Jordo, and today I'm going to present my TLX talk, which is about thinking cross-compatible. Note that this talk will not touch on avatars. This is purely world and for world creators only. Although I guess there are some tips you can use for avatar, but most of them are just worlds. So yeah. So play. So I'm Jordo. I've been playing VRChat since December 2018. I started world creating around the beginning of 2019 by porting game maps, including the Mad Moxie, this way, Mad Moxie's bar from Borderlands, and then I got into the Prefabs community, so that was around April 2019. Then I ported the Ebon Hawk from Night of Zero Republic, a very good game that I love. And then I participated in Spookality 2019, I mean, with Meat Grinder, which scored second in the cross-platform category. Then Udon came out. I made Dab with Friends. And with the knowledge I got from creating Meat Grinder, I created a Unity tool called EasyQuestSwitch that allows you to automate components, changes on components depending on the build target you have. But I'll explain that later in the presentation. And finally, about a month ago, I released Thermal Treatment, which is a sequel to Meat Grinder for Spookality 2020. And that actually won first place in, again, cross-compatible. So why would you make a quest world? Well, I can tell you my philosophy. Making a quest world is about, for me, the challenge. The challenge of making a quest world with the requirement that we have. And it also, like, it gives cool world for people to play with. People that have the quest, people that can tell their friend about VR, and how great they're having fun and such. And, well, the quest is getting the quest is going to get even more popular than it is right now, as you can see with reports of the Quest 2 having 5 times the pre-order of the Quest 1, and we're not even Christmas yet. So I can see that Quest popularity is going to be rising. So if you want to have your world be enjoyed by people, you know, I think it's interesting to port it to Quest or to make Quest worlds. So I'm going to be talking about how I set up a project for making quest worlds. So first, you have to install the Android SDK. If you don't have it, you go to the Unity Hub, you go to your installs, you click on Add Module on your Unity installation, and you check Android SDK, and you download that, and it will work. Automatically switches, okay. Don't duplicate your project. So VRChat documentation tells you duplicate your project and just report the changes you make in between each version. For me, I believe that's counterintuitive, and it's also very, very, very prone to errors. For example, you could like have some objects that are not at the same position in the hierarchy, and that could lead to desync or issues that you wouldn't have otherwise. So I feel like it's just easier to just use the same project. And I'll explain how you can do that with different tools afterward, because okay, and that is using the local cache. So the issue is that switching from PC to Quest takes a long time, but Unity actually has a solution built in for that, which is local cache. And the local cache has an option to be local, so it's on your computer, and it just works. So for that, you go to Preferences, Cache Server, and you click on Cache Server mode, and you put it to local. And that way, basically, when you're switching from PC to Quest, it will look in the cache, see if it already has imported some assets for Quest, and it will just, if there's no changes, then it can just import that version. Basically, you'll turn converting a project to PC or Quest from like 10 minutes or more to like, how about like, and 1 minute 30 seconds. So yeah, it's really useful feature, and that's what allows you to not have to duplicate your project pretty much. There is something to note is that the first time you do it will be long, like it would be otherwise if you know didn't have the cache server, because it creates all the assets in the cache server. So the first time you switch from PC to Quest, it'll take a long time. First time you switch to Quest to PC, you'll take a long time, and then it will be extremely fast. And also deactivate V-Sync, especially if you're doing udon stuff, that allows you to see your CPU frame time usage. Otherwise, it would just kick in V-Sync and you'd see like 12 milliseconds. There we go. I went too fast. My bad. See. Nope. There we go. So like, okay, never mind. So I guess it just switches. I hope it doesn't do that for all my slides because I had lots of stuff. So yeah. So now I'm going to be talking about the tools. All these tools can be found in the Prefabs database, which I believe will probably have a link on the video if orals can do it later. So the first tool I want to talk about is the VRWorld Toolkit by One. So the VRWorld Toolkit allows you to get some optimization tips or like fix some common issues you can have in your project. It will automatically tell you, you know, different stuff, or it will tell you if your occlusion cache is too big. So it's really useful information that you can use while you're making your world. But it also has one option that is very important, and it is build reports. And build reports will allow you to see how much space your build is taking and what assets are taking up which space. So it's very useful. It separates between PC and Quest, so you can clearly see like, oh, this asset is taking this much megabyte and such. So it's really useful. I got it. I pause it now. So yeah, as you can see, the build reports for PC and Quest, and you can clearly see like all the memory space taken by the different assets you have in your project. The second one I want to talk about is EasyQuestSwitch, which is my own tool that I developed after making Meat Grinder. So as I said earlier, it allows you to automate changes on component. What that means is that if you drag a game object, you can change the layer, you can change the tag, you can change the static flags. Basically, automatically, as soon as it changes from PC to Quest, all you have to do is drag in the component, and then you change the different setting there is. If you drag in a shader, if you drag in material, you can change the shader on that material. If you're dragging a mesh renderer, you can change the anchor point, you can change the materials, you can change the light probes, etc. So I made this because it was very tedious, very tedious to make the changes between the Meat Grinder PC and Meat Grinder Quest, and I made this to be as easy as possible to use. So if you're looking for a tool to do Quest Worlds, I mean, give it a try. Another tool that I'm going to talk about is CyanogenMu. If you don't have CyanogenMu, don't let CyanogenMu. Just do it. There's no question. It's just to do it. It's necessary at this point. Not even if you're making Quest World, just making any world general. Download CyanogenMu allows you to test your entire project directly in editor. It matches up pretty well. The video is not playing. There we go. And it just works. And for example, say you have changed your project to Quest, and you don't have the VRChat test and build feature, you can still test in editor because of CyanogenMu. So next up, okay, back on track. So next up is the frame debugger. So the frame debugger will allow you to see what the camera is rendering, and all the batches that the camera is going through. So you go to a window, um, analysis, frame debugger, and you can open the frame debugger right here, and you can select, for example, um, one of the batches and see why it didn't get batched with other one, like so. And for example, here you can't read it, but I can. Objects are affected by different light reflection probes, and it allows you to really know what's going wrong with your map and why your batches are so high and such. So really useful tool that you should use all the time when testing. And the best thing is you can combine that with CineEmu. You can launch an editor. You can get wherever, for example, you would have the most batches at once, and then you open it, you click enable, and you can go through all of it, and you can see exactly where the pain points are of your project. Moving on, I'm going to talk about best practices on my side, at least, as I said, for making quest worlds. So the biggest one, the most important one, is to think quest first. Always think quest first. Basically, it's just like a completely different way of thinking compared to making a normal world. You have all the requirements, you have all the constraints that you have, so you really need to change the way you're thinking about how you approach the world. If you want to do like a super wide open world, you're gonna have to do a lot of thinking to get that working on Quest. There's not much I feel I can say here. It's really like something that you have to work with the requirement, and you have to see how much you can get away with the hardware. Remember that most people still have Quest 1. VRChat still has the guidelines set to Quest 1. So Quest 2 might have different experience that will be better, obviously, but still gotta remember that a lot of people are using Quest 1s. So one of the VRChat guideline is to keep it at 50,000 polygons. And you might see reports that Quest can handle a lot more than 50,000. And yeah, it's true, it can. But the only issue is you don't see what's in the Quest user headset. Maybe they have a friend which has a very poor avatar on Quest, but still shows them, and their polygon count is way up. So, and I mean, just in general, try to keep it as small as possible. The world as small as the footprint as possible, because you don't know what they're seeing. The guideline you're seeing where they say like, oh, it can have way more than 50K. That's because the application that people are developing usually are contained. This VRChat is made with other people content, so you can't be sure that they're exactly seeing what you were meant for them to see. So make it as small footprint as possible for Quest users. Now onto texture compression methods. So the default, I believe, is ETC, and while it's small, the quality, I don't know if you can see, but the quality is pretty eh. That's why if you're gonna do a quest world, it's better to use ASTC. And basically what ASTC allows you to do is that it uses block sizes for compression, and that allows you to have way more control on the quality versus size of the texture. If there's a texture is going to be far away, you can use a block size that is bigger. If there's a texture that is very precise, that you want very precise on close-up, you can use a smaller block. So I guess the example here doesn't work much because we're all in VR. People that are watching the stream probably have a better view of it. But basically, ETC has big artifacts here. Trust me, it has. And for example, using ASTC 6x6, it sure quadruples the size, but that's because I'm using such a big block for that, which is 6 by 6. I can go up to 14, I believe. Check. Oh, well, you're not gonna see that either, but yeah, basically, when you select the texture, you can override the default, and you can change the format of the texture right here. The STC is right here. But yeah, so ACC is very useful to personalize how much you want quality over size of the texture, and you really got a lot of options there. So make sure you use it. To change the default compression to be ASTC, you go on the build settings and you change the setting right here to ASTC, and every time a texture will be imported, it will automatically be set to ASTC, and then you can override it if you want, to tweak the quality. So another point is to avoid transparency. So I took this example from thermal treatment. So this is one of the beam that are under the platforms in the map. I don't know if you played the map. And we could have totally made a quad, and we put transparency on it and be done with it. But a mobile GPU have really bad alpha fill rate, so you want to avoid that as much as possible. So for example, with this, what we did, we just did this. So it's all cut out. It's not, there's no transparency here. It's just opaque. It's just that it's cut out on the border, and it just works. And there is like 28 of those pillars. So if 28 of those pillars, at transparency all over, it'd be very bad, and the quest would be crying a bit. Another thing is, like, when you start the map, there's a big, giant glass panel that allows you to see the arena. And that was also an issue. So what I did is I just used EasyQuestSwitch, drag the glass panel in, put it to editor only if it's quest. And boom, whenever I change the quest, it disappears. But people don't assume it's empty. People still assume there's a glass because there's a huge frame around it. And it just works. So, that's yeah, avoid transparency as much as possible. Try to find ways to work around it. Try to find a way maybe to fake it. But yeah, just avoid it as much as possible. Pack your metallic and smoothness, roughness map. So back then, a while back, I was very lazy, and for example, when I was using a substance and I wasn't using the Unity presets, I would see like, oh, here's a metallic, here's a roughness. Well, I'm just gonna find a shader that can use them and such. And because the standard, uses the smoothness in the metallic alpha, and I'm like, no, just use this metallic and have the smoothness is the alpha. Like, take the time to learn how to, like, if you're doing textures manually, take the time to learn how to basically pack that smoothness in the alpha of the metallic, because it's one less texture. If you have atlas for everything, that's clearly one less atlas. So just do it. Yeah. So GPU instance everything. Well, not everything, but if you have a dynamic object, if you have, so for example, let's say like a lot of drinks or such, GPU instance those definitely. Back in 2017, when I was doing Meat Grinder, GPU instancing didn't support light probes. So what I had to do was dynamic batch every prop, and dynamic batching is horrible. It's only 300 vertices, so I had to be really careful. I actually had to use a completely different shader for Quest, I believe, to make it work. And it's just, now GPU instancing in 2018 support light probes, so just use it. Just use it. If you have any dynamic object, just use GPU instancing. You just go to the material, you click the checkbox, and it will just work. Do note that some stuff will break it, most notably reflection probes. So don't be shy of setting the anchor of dynamic objects manually sometime. So it doesn't like pick up another reflection probe and break the instancing. If you use the frame debugger, it will show up as a draw mesh instance in parentheses. Atlas everything. Atlas everything you can, if possible. If you have a group of objects that are, in the same area that are in common, Atlas that. Here, that's all the props for thermal treatment. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 props in that one Atlas. So that means they all use one material that is GPU instance. I can have as many props as I want in the map. They're pretty much all batched into one call, pretty much. So yeah, just Atlas as much as you can to avoid draw calls, pretty much. Remove real-time GI. Unless you're doing a theater world, remove real-time GI. I think it's really like for theater, for like open world that has day-night cycles and such. Just remove it. It's a big size sink, and if you don't use it, it's a big size sink for nothing. So just remove real-time GI. And remove, well, not remove, no real-time light. Try to avoid real-time light. Really bake as much as you can. If you really have to, I guess you can add real-time light, but I guess it would be for shadows. So if you want to do that for shadows, instead try to go for something like blob shadow. This is like just a simple, this is like Oral's world, and it basically puts a blob shadow under the player, and it just like, so there's no real-time light, it's just a blob shadow and it just works. So yeah, fake it pretty much. You could also do so that all the tips, like the tips I did, real-time GI or the real-time light here, you can also think of it as like, you can make it so Quest doesn't have it, PC has it, especially with tool like EasyQuestSwitch, you can make it so one scene has it and one scene doesn't. Next, use occlusion culling. So occlusion culling will hide anything that isn't in view, that is a separate object. When it's not in view. And you go here to window rendering occlusion culling, and you bake it. And then you launch CyanogenMU, and you select the camera, and you click on visualization, and you check everything. You have a scene view, you have a game view, and you can see what gets culled, and you just test using that. If it doesn't work, you tweak the settings to make it work. If it still doesn't work, you can even set up components like the occlusion area or the occlusion portal to make it work even better. There's documentation on Unity. You can click on that button right here, but basically occlusion area are everywhere where your camera is gonna be. So if you have a lot of room, you can set occlusion areas around all these rooms, and when you bake, it will, say you have a big scene with 2 rooms, it won't do any occlusion baking on the middle, pretty much, if you have 2 areas that are around those rooms. And for portals, say you have a door, if the occlusion area is closed, it won't render past that. The occlusion portal is closed, and you just change that with animations. Yeah, it basically allows you better control on the occlusion you're doing. Use static batching. So if you have objects that are static, just static batch them, and basically Unity will merge them automatically to reduce the number of draw calls that occur during gameplay. Do note that if you have an object that is too big, it could lead to some size issues or I believe occlusion issues. So just something to note. But yeah, most of the time you want a static, batch static as much as you can, and it's right here on the top right of the game object. You click on the drop down and you're batching static. I'm not going to talk very quickly on common issues that I found with making quest worlds. And a big one is mismatched eye. So this is a representation of what you would see when you put on the quest. Or you would see the last frame you had on the left eye being stuck. Usually, that's an incompatible shader being used. So for example, if you have a grab pass or I believe geometry shader, that's not gonna work on Quest. So don't do it. I had during thermal treatment when we were testing on Quest, we noticed this was an issue, and it was because the barrel had a particle effect that had distortion on, and then it created a grab pass, and that broke it. So again, EasyQuestSwitch, grab that, put it on editor only on Quest, and it just worked. And also, one thing, there are reports that this button right here also causes this issue. So, if you can, please use this button instead, manually switching. I don't know if the report is still a thing or not, but since the canny is still open, I'm gonna guess yes. Another issue you could run into is textures or light maps, especially light maps, are ugly. And they'll look, trust me, in the video, it's way clearer. Check the video afterward. I got in VR, it's not visible. But you can see a lot of artifacts here, again, on the video. And basically, usually that's because the texture is using ETC on the left. So you would just change it to ASTC by clicking on the object, going in the light map dropdown, click on the light map, select the light maps, and override it. Although I believe if you have the build setting already built in, it should automatically set it to STC, but still check. If your light maps are ugly, that's probably why. Another issue is sometime you will change the build target to Android or PC, and the cache server wasn't connected, and you have to re-import everything. That's really annoying. I don't know if it's placebo or not, but usually whenever I'm about to change, I always click the check cache size. And if it returns a number, that means it's connected, and I just change. Usually, from my experience, this happens when you have multiple projects open. Like if you open multiple projects, yes, that's usually when it happens. So yeah, just something to be aware of. Just try it. Ever since I did it, it never happened. So, you know. And let me quick talk about the future. When Unity 2019 is when VRChat is going to be ported to Unity 2019, we're going to have access to the asset import pipeline v2, which is basically a cache server but on steroids. So keep that in mind. Like, I think after Unity 2019, there's like no reason to duplicate projects because it should be way faster to transfer from PC to Quest and from Quest to PC. So yeah, just I guess wait for well, I mean, right now use cache server, and then 2019, use that. Anyway, I'll conclude my presentation. If you have any question, please go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question. So there's a bunch of different ways to create blob shadows. What would you recommend?
Hmm. Well, probably I would say just udon and oh just udon and using the just basic player tracking, I believe.
Well, I can answer
That's,
that
I mean, that's how I would
since
personally do it. But
since I
Orals
made.
as one, and I think it probably will release it eventually. So
I mean, it's just a depth-based shader in that case, but you can do it if you don't have depth in the world because you want it save into performance like that. You can even just, if you have spare CPU cycles, you can raycast to the bottom, or just have a shader that uses, if you have a flat ground plane, you can just have a shader that just, calculates the difference. In my world, it's just a player-based tracker that has a sphere, which has a depth-based shader that just, blends with the ground, like a dark thing with the ground, and that's it. So it's very fast in that regard. And if your world is flat, then it's even faster than that.
So I will point out that Unity has a built-in blob shadow prefab in some of the standard assets, which is projector based. Do not use that.
Projector's bad, yeah.
Yeah, it will
I wanted to quickly comment
if it goes through much.
On the ETC and stuff. You cannot see banding in here because we're in the world with post-processing that debands things, so it's like not possible to see banding artifacts. So
okay,
yeah.
Trust me, it was there. Trust me. Check the video.
Yes.
It was there.
I've been back up Jordo, like on a quest map. So like, yeah, banding is really obvious when you use ETC on quest.
Yeah, just pink spot everywhere. Just
yeah. This one's more of like an open-ended one. As someone who's currently working on a pretty large open world that I plan on making Quest compatible, I've pondered over like many solutions as to how to tackle how am I actually going to handle having this much content and still making it Quest friendly? And one of the solutions I came up with was, all right, I'm going to restrict most of the world to PC only and then have sections of it that Quest users can hang out in and teleport to. These would be the ones that are probably the most aesthetically pleasing, so plenty of PC people are going to hang out there anyway, meaning that people can still like interact with each other, but it would give sort of like a easy cop-out of, hey, so they can still be in the world and talk with people and see some cool stuff, but they don't have to see everything. Do you think that would be good? Like, generally speaking, do you think Quest users would have a problem with that? Or do you think it's generally better to try and make the whole world as accessible as possible?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna obviously say that it's better to make the whole world accessible because, like, as you said, they could be playing with PC user and then, they're having a conversation and PC user head off in an area that they can't go to. I feel like it's a bad experience. Do note that, when I said 50,000 polygons, I forgot to mention that it's rendered at the same time. So you could totally have, as long as it doesn't exceed that 50,000, for example, rendered at the same time.
It's kind of a problem where my ground currently renders more than that. So.
Well, you could have it split. Yeah, also, yeah, LODs, but I mean, you could have it split, and you would still have the system of like it cuts off here for Quest users, but they could like, how do I say? I want to give an example. Well, I can't think of one right now, but like, kind of like if you were changing, tile in a game, like if you were in an RPG Maker game, for example. And you're going from the left to the screen to the right or something, and it just changes level. Oh, Zelda, there we go. Like one of the old ones, where it clears everything behind and it just changes the zone. Could be something like that, for example. You didn't catch what I'm saying?
So you're saying split everything into chunks and then use manual occlusion zones to turn on or off most of them, depending on where you are?
I mean, yeah, that could work, I think.
That's good.
Anyone else has any question?
Hey, Jordo.
Hello.
Since you started the talk with think of Quest first, I think most people haven't,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of people who will want to port content that exists on PC to Quest. And my assumption is that the biggest issue people have is either performance in terms of draw calls or batches, or the size of the world itself. For the size of the world itself, if people had to cut down on things, what do you recommend as being the best or the most important things to do in terms of, audio, textures, meshes, etc.?
I say like most of the time it's gonna be your texture size, and I say just don't be shy to downscale the texture size. I mean, it's better that the world actually exists than it not existing, if you catch my drift. So, even if it's like a lower quality of texture, like it will still be out there. So yeah, I think it's mostly texture you want to downscale to if your problem only was, for example, size. Now if your problem is like draw calls and such, it's definitely gonna be much harder, and that's why I said think Quest first, because usually porting from PC to Quest is gonna be very difficult in that regard. Like it's definitely not a size issue. It's mostly like draw calls being way too high, and you really have to rethink how the scene was made and how to optimize it.
Another question would be, what was the biggest issue with doing the last world you did on Quest specifically? The new challenges that you didn't have in the previous
Well,
world?
thermal treatment, actually, surprisingly, almost none. Like, the biggest issue was, I think, the pillar that I highlighted earlier, but everything else went smooth. Since I had more experience from making Meat Grinder the first time, I had EasyQuestSwitch to help me. I had VR-World Toolkit. I had CyanEmu. And it just, I guess, since I thought of it Quest first this time, it just went really smooth. And also, I had a Quest to test, which really helps. If you have a Quest, it's definitely gonna help with making cross-compatible worlds. If you don't, try to make a friend who does, so you can test your content for you. But yeah, in that instance, I didn't have much issues, especially with GPU instancing being way more forgiving than dynamic batching. I still try to get the poly count as low as possible for props, for example, but it was way more forgiving than Meat Grinder, where I had to do the 300 vertices, can't go past that, or the instancing is broken. So yeah.
I guess small note for Prefabs member, we have a role that's called Quest Testers, I believe.
Yeah.
You can ping if you have content you need to be
We
tested
do.
if you don't have a Quest, so that's also helpful.
We have time for one more question, so I guess Hi is the one.
Hello.
I'm currently making a game where there's likely to be a lot of sound effect going on at the same time. Is it ever a problem on Quest?
I didn't touch that, but yeah, I believe Quest is lower amount of audio voices.
Yes. 32.
Yeah.
Yes.
So be aware of that. Although I think if you set the priority correctly, it should work. Basically, it will just call the sound effects and they won't play. Yeah. So I guess you just have to be aware of the audio priority, because I mean, each player is an audio voice. If each player are talking at the same time, that's X audio voice potentially at the same time. If they're close enough to each other, like if everyone is super close.
Don't use
Now, if
Vorbis on
everyone's more
Quest.
spread out, Ake would
Why is
know
that,
more
Natalie?
about audio than me on this.
Don't use Vorbis on Quest. Og Vorbis, don't
What
use it
else
on Quest.
do people use?
There's like how there's options with the import settings of textures to use like ATST, you can use MP3 on Quest, exclusively on Quest, and there's a dedicated part of the Quest for encoding MP3 files.
Is that part of EasyQuestSwitcher?
No. That's directly native to Unity. You know,
Oh,
when you
okay.
click on an object and you can change the
No, but I mean, like
you can change the import
switch,
setting of that object.
When you switch, will Unity automatically do that conversion back and forth, or is that something you have to set up?
The Unity, that's already built in. Unity will do that.
Awesome.
Wait.
Same for the textures. Right. I believe that's it.
Yeah, click
Thank
stop.
you for coming to my talk.